Hey everyone, it's Peggy from the Kovler Diabetes Center. Today we are talking to my friend and coworker and colleague Anastasia Harris. Hey Anastasia, how are you?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Thank you so much for joining us today. I think what's been fun as we are trying to sort of live in this new normal of sheltering in place, I've been able to really talk to members of my own team that I talk to every day and help you share with a broader audience the important work that you do. So, Anastasia, you've been with us now, I'm thinking 2 years. 2 years of being with
Yeah,
us?
2.5 years now.
2.5 years. And so tell me a little bit more, or just for the sake of our audience, tell me a little bit more about you and your background, because you've got a really cool background, and tell us about your work now at Kovler.
Yeah. So I got my undergraduate degree at the University of Missouri with a concentration in health sciences, and then a minor in women and gender studies. I then went on to get my master's in public health at Boston University with a concentration in maternal and child health. And then I moved to Chicago in 2017, started working at Kovler in November of that same year. And currently I'm a clinical research coordinator too with our team. So that means I'm doing a lot of the consenting process. I know a lot of the participants, and also get to do the kind of data analysis side of that, where we do presentations, we write research articles, and then also the outreach part. So connecting with providers, connecting with participants, just to share more information about monogenic diabetes as a whole and kind of what we do.
I think that's great for our audience to hear a little bit more about the work that you do. I talked to Rabia today, and Rabia is another team member of ours who does clinical research. What's interesting, which a lot of people don't know at Kovler, is we have a huge clinical research and research enterprise as part of the Diabetes Center. And the arm you work in is focusing on the genetics of diabetes, which is a big portion of the work that we do in research. So tell us a little bit more about monogenic diabetes and specifically the genetic diabetes research that you do.
Yeah. So monogenic diabetes is different than type 1 and type 2. It affects about 2 to 5% of people with diabetes. And it kind of, to explain it, monogenic diabetes means a one gene or a single gene mutation that ends up causing these high blood sugars. And so the only way that you can confirm that you have it is with genetic testing. And so that is part of our research study. We provide to the participants free of charge this testing. And then after we get those results, if they're positive, we share that with their provider and then try to tailor their treatment options. So people with monogenic diabetes, their treatment can vary from, just doing diet and exercise all the way to, continuing to be on insulin, or then also sulfonylureas or oral medications. And so it can look different. Treatment can vary from type 1 and type 2. But our research study is all about learning about this rare form of diabetes and then tailoring, treatment for these people.
So from what I understand, about 5% of the diabetes population has some genetic form of diabetes. Does that sound about right?
Right. Yep.
Yeah. And I think what we've learned in our group over time is that it's hard to sometimes define people by, I have type 1 diabetes, I have type 2 diabetes, I have genetic forms of diabetes, because often probably within your program, you'll see someone or hear about someone, and maybe we know they have a genetic form of diabetes, but we still don't know what kind it is.
Yeah, that definitely happens where, they don't really fit within type 1 or type 2, like you were saying, but then we get that testing back and it also isn't a monogenic form. There is, research studies that we're, developing now, where we're doing whole exomes. So looking at their entire gene to see if there are any other causes. And so, with this rare form of diabetes, it's in like the beginning, early stages. So the research that we do is very kind of groundbreaking and new. So a lot of the information that we find is like for the first time. And so it's always a process, and we're continually learning about how to best serve and identify these people.
I think what's been fun for me as a nurse sister partner with your team to help people understand that there are ways that they can get tested. There's also ways that they can understand a little bit more about their diagnosis just by thinking about their family history or their symptoms. So people with genetic forms of diabetes, they don't always present or look like somebody who who has typical type 1 or type 2. Isn't that right?
Yeah, that's true. So some of the criteria that we see, or the clinical features that we see, for folks with monogenic forms, they can have multiple generations of, high blood sugars or diabetes. They typically are diagnosed under 35 years of age. For, type 1, you typically see an auto, immune response in the body, but people, with monogenic diabetes don't have any auto antibodies. So those can typically be negative. If we're looking at, BMI, that's typically, in the average range. It's not extremely high BMIs that we see. And then for neonatal forms, most of those babies are diagnosed under 6 months of age. We do see under a year, but most people are diagnosed under 6 months of age with those neonatal forms. So it does look different, and there are clinical features that we've been able to identify that kind of distinguishes it between.
So if a patient of ours, or say somebody who sees this video, it's like, you know what, I have a story, or I have a clinical diagnosis that is kind of weird, right? I'm young, but I was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, but I'm thin, or I'm tall. And my dad and my grandpa both had diabetes. How do they get in touch with us? So like, what do they do? Does their doctor reach out to us? Do they reach out to us? And how do they contact us?
Yeah, so we do have a website that's pretty comprehensive in what we look for, like those features that I was talking about, but we also have a registration form. So they would just complete that form. We get those directly to our email address, and then I would reach out to them to set up a time to talk about their story, to collect some of that, information about their, blood sugars, their family history. And so that can typically be done as soon as they fill out the registration form. We can, get a phone call scheduled within the week. So they would just go to our website to get that ball rolling.
Great. So Monogenic Diabetes Dot Org is a special website that you and your team have created that is probably the best website for individuals who are interested in genetic forms of diabetes. That's a special Kovler website. They can also go to KovlerDiabetesCenter.org that will take them to this website, but Monogenic Diabetes Dot Org is the best website. And as Anastasia says, she personally handles a lot of the inquiries, looks at the registration forms, and then follows up with people. I think people from all over the world have contacted us over time. Tell us a little bit more about the work that you're doing with Dr. Rochelle Naylor, because I find that really interesting, that Dr. Naylor is really trying to understand why certain people are or are not getting information about a genetic form of diabetes, and how we can help.
Yeah. So Dr. Naylor also wants to, like you said, look at what are the barriers to getting access to our registry. And then once they're enrolled, what types of barriers may be present to the communication that we give out to them. And so Dr. Naylor also wants to look at, the racial and ethnic minority groups and how we can best represent them. And then the information that we collect, we want to be able to disperse it and just represent the United States accurately. And so, like I said, one of the barrier studies that we're currently looking at is it's a qualitative study. So we're doing, phone calls with people, just asking them about their story, asking them what it was like, how did you find the registry, did your doctor know about it? And then once you got your results back, your genetic testing results, how was that process for you? Was it understandable? Did you, have any questions? Were they answered? And so we're always doing this like kind of quality improvement, making sure that people get their questions answered. So that way going forward, we can, best serve them and their providers.
Well, I think that makes a lot of sense. I think one of the hallmarks of the University of Chicago, and certainly the Kovler Diabetes Center, is we are trying to figure out what the issues are around access to care, and what the barriers and the challenges can be for people of all ethnicities and all backgrounds. But I think when you possibly have a diagnosis of diabetes that maybe isn't exactly correct, and you could potentially be on a different treatment pattern, maybe you don't have to be on insulin at all. We at Kovler, just like you said, like, we want everybody to know about these research studies and know that they could actually get tested if they have clinical variations in their diagnoses. As you and I have seen, we've seen patients that were diagnosed at the age of 11 with type 1 diabetes. For instance, one gentleman I'm thinking about in particular, who I think you've met, but he wasn't on insulin for like 10 years. So if you are diagnosed in childhood with, quote, type 1 diabetes, but you don't have to take insulin for 10 years. That's an interesting story, right?
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
from an ethnic standpoint, is there cultural ethnicities or breakdowns that we're seeing where maybe a particular group has a higher diagnosis rate, but maybe other ethnicities or people of different origins aren't getting the information? So, like, what are we seeing in our current registry right now in terms of ethnic breakdown? I'm just curious.
Yeah, so predominantly our registry is made up of people who identify as white, Caucasian, and so that's like about 80% of our registry. Um, the access to research as a whole, I think, could be improved. Also, people being
Hmm.
interested, people coming from racial and ethnic minority groups haven't historically been as interested in participating in research because of the history of being abused with that.
Sure.
So that's part of our outreach efforts is to do kind of community-based participatory research where we're asking communities, how can we best serve you? What can we do to make this more user-friendly? How can we better explain our studies? And also the benefits of our studies and how you could get this to the participant free of charge testing, how we want to collaborate with their healthcare providers. And there are a lot of, I think, assumptions that providers may make on a participant based on their racial or ethnic minority group status. And so we kind of want to dispel all of that. And so we're definitely doing that. We're in the works to kind of improve our outreach to all groups and making sure that we represent everyone.
I really appreciate that. And I think a lot of people struggle with this where they take a concept or an idea that they've legitimately heard about, and sometimes they will bring it to their local physician or their primary care physician. The primary care physician says, no, 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 your chart says that you've got type 2 diabetes. It says
Right,
right here, that's what you've
right.
got. It really is okay, I think, to your point, to reach out to us directly, to be empowered to reach out to us through Monogenic Diabetes.org and learn more. Because if you have a feeling that your diabetes is special or different or doesn't fit the mold, it's okay to ask questions. And even if your
Yeah,
doctor isn't sure or doesn't know about genetic forms of diabetes, we can reach out to them, or
yes,
we can have the patient reach out to us or the person, and then we can contact their physician.
yep,
Great,
absolutely.
great. I'm wondering about how we've been able to promote this and how we can continue to promote this. So, what can you tell us about the Jaffee family and the documentary that was put out a couple of years ago, and how do you think that's affected our registry in terms of people who contacted us?
Oh yeah, it affected it tremendously in a great way. People started enrolling at extremely high numbers. It kind of put a face to this, rare form of diabetes. So people could look at this family and say, we look like them. We, understand what they've been going through, the confusion that, surrounded not really being sure which form of diabetes you have, and it kind of coming at you fast, especially with really being diagnosed so young. And so, I think it's helped tremendously. Currently, we are doing, more material resources. So, hard copies of, fact sheets that they can share with their providers. We're trying to create, packets that participants, once they get their monogenic form of diabetes, they can give to their doctors to kind of explain what treatment options we may have. We're trying to expand our telemedicine so that way our doctors can, connect with the patients and just get more specific with their case, and then also connect with their current endocrinologist wherever they may be, so we can kind of be global and have those connections. And then, we're always just sending out information with our newsletter. We have a newsletter that we send out quarterly that just shares updates on the monogenic diabetes news, any research studies that they may be interested in participating in. We're going to be sending one out soon that also just has COVID-19 related support that we may have for
Wonderful.
participants. So we're always trying to stay in contact. We predominantly do that via email, but always looking for better ways to connect with people.
So, I started this program with Dr. Phillips in the Kovler Diabetes Center that has really grown and changed in the last 14, 15 years. And it's this genetic diabetes program and arm of research started with this amazing Jaffee family who created a documentary that I was referring to called Journey to a Miracle. We started with just a handful of people in the United States in our genetic diabetes registry. How many people do we have in the registry right now?
Yeah, we have over 3,600
Wow.
participants. Yeah, from like around
Wow.
1,900 different families. So
So, Anastasia, I think you've shared some really important and valuable information today about how many people are in our registry, which is incredible, the work that we do in genetics and diabetes research. How has this made an impact on your life and perhaps even with your own personal experience with diabetes, whether it be in your family, among your friends, etc.?
yeah, before working at Kovler, I didn't know about monogenic diabetes, similar to a lot of people who don't really know about it. So I've learned so much about this very, specific, rare, disease, and just like learning more about it and being able to give families answers has been extremely rewarding. Like I said, I kind of do that first intake where I learn about their stories, learn about their case. And then when we're able to go through, get their, saliva sample, do that testing in our lab, and then give them the result that they have a monogenic form of diabetes is extremely rewarding, especially if they've been, on insulin or oral medication. And that just can completely change their life. We have a family meeting that we have every 2 or 3 years, and there we get to meet the families in person, which is also very rewarding, just learning about these people and learning about how our research can serve them, and how, and then also seeing them meet other families, because like I said, it's rare. So meeting other people that are going through the same thing as them is amazing. So I've really enjoyed, working here and learning about this.
Thanks so much, Anastasia, for joining us today and for the important work that you do. As I've said to you many times, and I mean this sincerely, you're a real star on our team, and we want to continue to grow you professionally, get you out there talking to people in the community, and grow what we have really been known for, which is having one of the premier genetics diabetes registries in the United States, if not the world. So, Anastasia,
Mhm.
thanks again for joining us today. Have a great day.
Thank
Take
you.
care,
You
everyone. See ya.
too.
Bye.